Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Airworthiness Management and Aircraft Records series. My name is Jack Tunnell and I'm your host for this series. As I discussed in part 1, the PIC is primarily responsible for the airworthiness of the Part 91 aircraft the PIC is flying, whether owned, rented, borrowed, or paid to fly. So when I was learning to fly, it was in the very early 70s and the airspace was way less congested and didn't have many of the restrictions we have now. We did, however, have regulations that were very similar to the ones we use today, even back to the civil aviation regulations before the existence of the FAA. It was primarily World War II pilots that wrote the original general aviation regulations, and they wanted to give themselves ultimate authority, so they gave themselves ultimate responsibility. They made the PIC responsible for everything, but I've found no evidence that they ever tried to train new pilots with the skills and knowledge required for airworthiness management. Aircraft records are simply a way to prove due diligence in airworthiness management. Anyway, as my story goes, during pilot training, the instructor, as the PIC, should have been evaluating the airworthiness of the training aircraft and teaching me the skills and knowledge to do the same. When I soloed, he should have mentioned that I was now the PIC and had primary responsibility for the airworthiness of the airplane. None of that happened, and I'll bet it didn't happen for you either. So how do we start to analyze the airworthiness of the aircraft we fly? We take baby steps. Let's go through a checklist page that I developed with the help of a good friend and great instructor, Mike Monofusco. This is the renter's checklist, but owners and professional pilots should use this also to start getting to know the records of the aircraft they fly. It's time to start looking at actual aircraft records. Rental agencies may want you to accept some form of status sheet. These are found incorrect many times. Keeping status boards or status sheets to manage airworthiness is like creating two sets of books for your business. They're hard to keep in sync, and only the aircraft record is the aircraft record. If a rental agency wants you to just use a status sheet, then tell them you want it signed by an A&P or IA with current date and aircraft hours. If you have your homework assignment from part 1 or 2, you'll be ready with much of this information. This first outline section is to define the aircraft in question. You should record the aircraft model, VIN number, and serial number. If you have your homework information listed in part 1 and 2, you should have a lot of this. These should match the information on the airworthiness certificate and the registration certificate. Record the total time of the airframe and engines. Record the time since overhaul so you also have a sense of the age of the engines. Estimate the total time from the start of your rental to the end so you can verify that the aircraft will not overrun any inspections or recurrent airworthiness directives. These total times and TSOs should be derived from the actual aircraft records. Tech time is notoriously erroneous in relation to actual time. These records must be available because of the regulatory requirement in 91.417 maintenance records. A2, records containing the following information. I, the total time in service of the airframe, each engine, each propeller, and each rotor. I'll be flashing you to the regulations occasionally during this series of presentations. This is where you as a PIC or student start to read aircraft records. I've known a lot of great stick and rudder guys who wouldn't know what to look at in aircraft records. The problem that creates is when they get responsibility for an aircraft, whether by ownership or job, they don't know the level of talent and knowledge they need from their maintenance service provider. There are a lot of maintenance people who don't know how records should be kept as an operator. You cannot rely on a maintenance person or repair station who doesn't operate their own aircraft to provide complete airworthiness management with the appropriate records, sometimes not even then. As a PIC, you're not responsible for performing the maintenance or making the maintenance entries. You are responsible for knowing what an acceptable maintenance entry looks like. I'll have a part of the series dedicated to the form and function of maintenance record entries, but you can get a head start by reading FAR Part 43. Let's take a quick look at each of these items. You should be able to find the last 100-hour or annual inspection sign-off in the records for the airframe and the engines. If you find an annual sign-off for the airframe and a 100-hour sign-off for the engine for the same date and hours, that's okay. You should read through the records of what's been done while the aircraft is in service. The VOR check is only required for an aircraft that is used for IFR flight. You should be able to find records of the ELT inspection with the battery due date. Some training aircraft that operate in a limited area that is not within a Class B Mode C transponder area may not be required to have an ELT. If your aircraft has any device that uses a database with nav information, it should be kept up to date. Updating the database is not, in many cases, considered a maintenance item and may not have an aircraft record entry. Just check the device for its database date. If it's not up to date, time to break out the paper sectionals. Check for a compass correction card. Requirements are described in FAR 23.1327 and 23.1547 for small aircraft. Altimeter and transponder checks are due every 24 months. The altimeter checks are only required after the air data system has been disturbed or for IFR flight. Airworthiness Directive completion and the records to prove them are one of the FAA's primary dog whistles. It is also very easy for them to find compliance problems, including performance and record keeping. You should at least be able to find an AD listing that lists all applicable ADs, how and when they were complied with, and if they are repetitive. If the AD is repetitive, the next due time or date should be listed. AD compliance is a huge issue and is a responsibility of the IA or A&P who did the last inspection. If an AD came due or was issued in the time since the last inspection, that is on the PIC to know about and have accomplished if needed. Good luck with that. The PIC is responsible that this is done with correct record-keeping information and is responsible to have any AD complied with that may come due since the last inspection. There will be a complete series part on AD accomplishment and record keeping. Add any other maintenance that may come due during your rental period. If you're only going to be out for an hour or two, this may wind up being empty. Now, if you're renting for an hour of training, there's a good chance no items will come due during your rental, but if you're going on a cross country and possibly taking the aircraft for several days, your chances go up. Best to know. The servicing issues block is for things like how often do the tires need airing? How often does oil need to be added? How are the tires? Other things like this. This is much more important if you're on an extended rental. Are the aero documents on board? If it is your first time in the airplane, read each and check that they are current and accurate. Review the previous discrepancies from the last 60 days or so. If there is no formal discrepancy management process, read what records there are to see what has been worked on. Sometimes problems will reappear. Find out if the aircraft is under the care of one technician or one shop for all the maintenance. If the maintenance is catch can, the record keeping may be more problematic. If you're comfortable with the records you found in the compliance block, you may not need this. If you're uncomfortable with any of the records or the rental agency will only show you a status sheet, have an A&P or an IA sign your copy of the status sheet or this sheet. That could cover you on due diligence if anything happens that involves the FAA. This block has nothing to do with airworthiness management or record keeping. It is all about protecting your money. My recommendations are: know who owns the airplane, know who is renting or loaning the airplane to you. Are they the same? Make sure you're renting the airplane from someone who has the right to rent it. Know what their insurance is, know what your insurance is, know what subrogation is and how it might affect you if something happens to the aircraft during your rental period. Protect yourself. This block is for me. I want you to know that this is nowhere near all you need to know to assess the true airworthiness of an aircraft. This is also probably much more than you already know, so good luck and don't hesitate to ask questions. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask. They may wind up in a future part of this series. Thanks for watching. Bye.